Welcome to another episode of GQ Speaks, your go-to platform for insightful conversations, captivating stories, and thought-provoking discussions. GQ is a series of experiences, and we're just making sense of that as we go along. That is what we're doing here, one conversation at a time. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into our episode.
Welcome back to GQ Speaks. I'm your host, Remas Alhawari. I'm glad to be back. Today we have something truly special, a conversation that embodies the spirit of coming full circle. We're diving into the inspiring journeys of two remarkable individuals who walk these very halls. Well, maybe not exactly these halls, but they were once students at GQ and have now returned as the voices shaping the next generation of Hoyas. Our guests embody a remarkable transformation from curious students to accomplished scholars. They built their GQ foundation into extraordinary careers spanning continents, yet ultimately chose to return home. Now they stand on the other side, bringing their global expertise back to where their academic journeys first begun at GQ. Let me start by briefly introducing our guests. So I'll start with Dr. Khalid Al-Jufairi from the class 2009. So from GQ to international politics scholar, Dr. Al-Jufairi has spent 15 years shaping policy in Washington, D.C., New York City, Paris, and Doha. He's one of the founders of the AI Center for Storytelling and Intellectual Advancement, an author of the book The Centrality of Middle Class, Sociopolitical Resilience and Economic Stability. He's also an associate professor of international affairs at the American Graduate School and Qatar University, an Abshai and Amori Fellow at CSIS, as well as the inaugural Al-Kharij Fellow at Fikr Institute. Now he's returned to teach at GQ, bringing his international experience back to where it has all begun.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Introducing my second guest, so Dr. Maryam AlSada from the class of 2012. Also a GQ alumna, Dr. AlSada earned her PhD in anthropology from University College London and previously held a postdoctoral fellowship at GQ. She's currently serving as both an adjunct lecturer in our IHIS department and a postdoctoral fellow at Al-Mujadila, Center and Mosque for Women. She specializes in the histories of women in the Arabian Gulf, bringing overlooked narratives to light through her research on health, education, and cultural practices. Thank you, Dr. AlSada, for joining us here today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
I'm happy to have you both, and I'm excited for the conversation. This will be a very, very productive podcast for our students at Georgetown University and staff and faculty as well. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think I'll start with a very easy question, or perhaps more complicated. So what drew you both to GQ as students when you first started at Georgetown University in Qatar? What vision did you have for yourselves back then?
My story started literally 20 years ago. So August 2005, I was a freshman. So it's like if you look 20 years after, I'm coming back. It's like a full circle moment that I'm teaching. But it was the idea that the world then, which we lived in, was totally different. So didn't have, let's say, a technological development that we see now. So a lot of the discussion and narrative we're talking about the new global order. Back in that era or that period of time, discussion were revolving still around how states are still rational actors, and certain communities and state institutions are still having that discussion or dialogue within the state. So for me as a young person, I was like very much interested to understand better that, I won't say the politics, but that relationship. What is the variable in that relationship? And having had a background in science, I was like, okay, if we can put it in a formula, how can we compartmentalize activities between factors, theories, and actors? And Georgetown was the school that came to Doha and to Qatar was like, okay, I would say SFSQ because that's how it started. It offered a very unique perspective to how can we understand the world that we live in, but in a way that will unlock your critical thinking, unlock your potential, by that human capital, but QF vision. So what is that meaning for me? So I felt very much connected saying, okay, this is a place that I will really feel like I will grow and will take me to the next level. Back then, I didn't know what's the next level, but definitely for growth.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I'm going to go way back to my childhood, but then there's something in common with Khalid's experience. So growing up, I love to read. I still love to read. So I would read all the time. But then I was also a very smart student scholastically. And when you're a smart kid, what do people tell you?
Become a doctor.
Become a doctor. So I went into a science background. IB in high school, I did Chem HL and Bio HL and Math HL. And I also did English HL because I love English. But then I realized that I don't want to become a doctor. Throughout that process, my cousin, who knew that I was interested, air quotes made for people who are listening, in studying medicine, said, there's a Cornell in Doha. Why don't we go to, because I'm from Bahrain. So she was like, let's go to this event where these universities are coming. And I went, and do you remember there was an admissions officer called Liz?
Think yeah.
Yeah, so she is there. And she was,
Yes, Liz.
she was there. She was representing Georgetown. So I was fully engrossed in her speech about Georgetown. And then I was like, this is more of what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in understanding the human experience, what makes us tick and what makes us think and what makes us get along or disagree, and the daily politics that goes into our lives. So I was introduced to Education City through Cornell. But then that interest shifted towards Georgetown because of that event. And then I came to Georgetown to do a tour. I flew in. My parents were obviously very happy that I would go to university 20 minutes away and not like 14 hours away. So I flew in for a tour of the campus. It was the LAS building. Fell in love with how small the university was. Everybody knew each other. There was the professors and the students all had a close relationship. It felt like friendship. And I really liked that atmosphere. So I applied to other universities, of course, because that's what you do. But then as soon as I got into Georgetown, I knew that was where I was going.
That's very interesting. I mean, many students feel anxious about Georgetown University in Qatar because they feel like the career path is so flexible. You enter to medical school, you become a doctor. You go to engineering school, you become an engineer. Law school, you become like a lawyer. But you come to Georgetown, you're like, where am I going? Where am I ending up after this? I mean, it's a school of foreign service. Diplomacy is an option, but there's so many other areas that you could get into. If you could tell people more about the decision that made you choose academia.
So for me, I'm going to give a very realistic answer. So like you said, I entered Georgetown knowing what I wanted to study, but not knowing what I wanted to do exactly. And then I graduated and I had a hard time finding a job that I found appealing. And I ended up teaching part-time at a private institute in Bahrain called the Royal University for Women, which is my first teaching experience. But then even going through that, I wasn't committed to academia. It was more of something that I'm doing while I'm looking for something full-time. I studied anthropology. So I always knew that I wanted to share stories of women from my family. Sharing that story to me looked like writing a book about it. And the best way that I could envision doing this in an ethical and accurate format is to do it as a dissertation, because then I'd have the academic tools to write the story in a way that honors the legacy of the women that came before me. So during the time when I was teaching part-time, I decided to just apply and see what would happen. And it kind of snowballed from there. Even while I was doing my PhD, I didn't know that I would come back to the classroom. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you look at my CV now, it looks like I planned things, but I'm literally deciding day by day what's happening next. And I think this is true of so many opportunities in life. You don't know what's going to happen unless you take the leap. But then also, I'm just speaking specifically about Georgetown and working within the QF family. Never say no to anything. There are always opportunities around the corner, and not just professional opportunities, but opportunities to meet people, to attend events, to go to talks. As students, I'm sure your inboxes are flooded with invitations to lunchtime events and workshops and dinner and book launches. And it feels like you can't go because you need to study, right? But then when you go, it's not just sitting and listening to things that are happening. It's being aware of different activities and movements around you. And then you kind of get, if you're interested enough, you get sucked into them, right? Because you show interest and you ask the right questions, and then people remember your name, and then you get invited the next time they do something. So I think my big message to alumni is to go where your passions are, not because you have a plan, but because it's something you want to do right then and there. And step 2 will come up at a certain point. You can't predict it. You can't lay out a proper plan and follow it through. What do you think, Khalid?
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, I don't think you need to be with this stress and anxiety as a student, or especially graduating from high school, to be that methodical, that I need a plan A and B and C. Funny, the same story happened to me before joining Georgetown. I started as an engineer. My first degree was actually petroleum engineering. My parents graduated science and wanted me. I was the 6th on the state of Qatar. I was science background. I was honored by the Emir, the father, back in the day. So it was in 2004. I got a scholarship to study petroleum engineering, and I went for 1 year to study petroleum engineering. In my parents' mind, if it's not a doctor, if it's not Cornell, because the only school that was here, it was Texas A&M engineering. So I went to Texas A&M for 1 year, did foundation of engineering. And during that, I was exposed to, let's say, the social sciences, humanities part, in which I discovered I have a passion to it. It made me evolve as a person. I was graduated from high school, the age I'm like 17, 18, and then in the same time, something happened. Georgetown happened. Came to Doha, and the person who met me, I got interviewed by, his father Maher was here. So 20 years ago, yeah, he met me it was in a borrowed, not building, it was a borrowed corner at Qatar Academy. That was in 2005. I remember it was like around March 2005, Qatar Academy. I got in, I was like, and when I got in, with the acceptance letter, I made sure to switch my scholarship. So I have to convince the scholarship committee through the back in the days, the Supreme Council for Higher Education. So I convinced them. They said, yeah, we saw the talent, we see everything. So I switched I started with transferred into Georgetown without telling my parents.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, without telling my parents. So by August 05, they said, oh, good luck in your second year studying engineering. I was like, nope, it won't be engineering anymore. It'll be political science. So the only major I had, but it was option for me, was international politics. Was the only thing we had. But funny enough, in summer 2008, I took an internship with ExxonMobil, which is an oil and gas big conglomerate. And because of that internship, they said, I remember that my first upper boss, and he was like, oh, we want you. We need someone who understands science. He can speak to engineers and understand politics. And upon graduation, I went into ExxonMobil. So that was back in the days, the job market was lined up because the context in which Qatar, the world was looking into, was different. Oil prices are going up, economic growth, and there was the need for people that can understand both worlds. So it was not planned. I didn't plan it. So it just happened that he was like, no, we want you. And it actually, through the company, through Exxon, I moved to a different location because it was a multinational corporation. Started with them here. Took some work assignments in Abu Dhabi, then London. From London, they took me all the way up to DC, in which when I was with them in DC, that opened the frontier. That opened for me the knowledge, the exposure. This is where I started to think, okay, now I want to pursue my master's, not because of anything, but because I turned 26 and my frontal lobe got developed. Because men, their frontal lobe get developed at the age of 26. Women tend to develop earlier. 25, they're more mature. They become more mature than men. 26, in that point, I was DC. This is where I would say the launch of my academic career, because it was tied to the experience that I was living in a city. I was a political capital of the world, access to resources, still working with Exxon, but I was part of that experience was working with think tanks, different institutions. One of them was academia, and the other one's think tanks and policymakers. Opened the chances for me to think, oh, there is another vehicle. So because I left let's say, the idea of a comfort zone. By the comfort zone, what's familiar, not the unfamiliar. So when I went to the unfamiliar, opportunities came.
That's amazing. Like, I think this is amazing advice for navigating uncertainty, which is like, don't go in with a plan, just follow your passion. I think you touched on my next question. So you both had like amazing, incredible experiences across continents. Dr. Jufairi, you taught across borders from classrooms in Paris, Washington, D.C., New York City, before returning to Qatar in 2022 to teach in Qatar University for the International Affairs Program, and Dr. AlSada to London for your PhD. What was it about GQ that kept pulling you back, even if after achieving so much globally?
I think personal reasons for me. I knew I wanted to have a family, and I knew I was going to raise my family in Doha. So I was living here, and then I attended an event and spoke to faculty members, and was introduced to I was wrapping up my PhD, and at the time there was a program called the Scholar in Residence program, which I think today is called the Visiting Researcher program. And it's an affiliation with the university. So you get a card, like an ID card, you get access to the library, you get an office, but it's an unpaid position. You just come in and you work. And that was really, it sounded really good to me because I needed to leave my house and my baby and work. So I did that. Georgetown is it feels like home. So it's a very friendly place. People know you on a personal level. So I did that. And while I did that, I was offered an adjunct instructor role. So I taught, I think it was a History 99 back when I taught it. It's 1099 now. So I taught that while I was wrapping up my PhD because I was a scholar in residence. And then after I graduated, I applied for the postdoc position here and I got it and continued teaching. And I'm still teaching today, even though that postdoc doc fellowship is over. But I think that kind of goes back to the advice question you were asking. The scholar in residence position doesn't sound good on paper to people. Like, why would your first job not pay? But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have been invited to be an adjunct instructor. If I didn't do the adjunct instructor position, I wouldn't have successfully applied for the postdoc fellowship. So it's important when you know what institution you want to be connected with or part of to get your foot in the door. And especially if you're a hard worker, people will see that when they come to work every day. So again, career planning is difficult because we can't see the future, but no move is a bad move is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, like, as you said, some things don't look good on paper, but they lead you to like next steps.
They really do.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't look good on paper, you have different seasons in your life. And I think as women, especially women who want to become mothers, you think about that a lot. Like, how am I going to study or work while having children? So even if it doesn't look good on paper, it still felt nice to leave that cocoon and enter a more professional environment and get to work with flexible hours and focus on my studies and then go back whenever I needed to. So the traditional formula, I guess, for professionalism doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Dr. Khalid, what drew you back to GUQ?
So the story, I think, goes back a bit. Before GUQ, it was Georgetown. In one point that I started my teaching, it happened in 2018. I was still like in the final year of my PhD. It's a joint program, and my PhD is a dual PhD between American University in Washington, D.C. and École Normale Supérieure in France through the American Graduate School. I was in D.C. and I met with my former dean, who used to be at SFSQ, Georgetown, Qatar, Daniel Stoll, who moved to the U.S. to become, back in the day, I think he was the dean of the School of Continuing Studies. And he said, "Oh, well, what are you working on? What's your dissertation? What are you working on?" I said, "Yeah, I'm working on the nexus of foreign policy and national security, looking into homegrown jihadism and different movements related to that." I was like, "Oh, actually, we have a program that you can come and start lecturing and potentially becomes teaching." I was like, oh, really? It's like I met with Dr. Tim Fraser in 2018, and he said, yeah, come, we'll invite you over for something called Counterinsurgency Man-Made Crises, part of the program they had a program called Emergency and Disaster Management. It's a master's level program. So I did that, DC, and it evolved into a program with a residency in Paris, and then the residency evolved into Paris, Lyon, and London. So COVID happened, so things started to become online. So teaching was still there, but because of the online activities, I was able to also work with think tanks. So I don't have to be physically in DC to be in this place versus the other place. So I was happily stuck in Paris. So from Paris, I was teaching US, advising students within Paris, the US, and also working with think tanks across the Atlantic. DC, and also in Paris with Avenue Montaigne and different institutions, Sciences Po. Where it happened to Qatar when things started to open up, the former president of QU, Dr. Sheikh Al-Misnad, was a close friend of Professor Amir Sumbul, who taught us back in the days in SFS. And Dr. Amir Sumbul, Professor Amir Sumbul, is the one who commissioned and opened the International Affairs program at QU. So that program in 2007, 2008, similar the program in Georgetown, but it's more of hosted within a national institution. So it has a similar structure by coursework, the idea for coursework. And that program got evolved, but they wanted people expert in, let's say, U.S. foreign policy, national security, very much specialized core requirement. Mm-hmm. But here's the catch. They have to be Qatari and it has to be discerned in Arabic. So the program is very much in Arabic. So in QU, I teach in Arabic. That was a huge challenge for me. I was like, imagine code switching now. So everything you name it, from theories of IR, Orientalism, culture and politics, all the way it has to be done in Arabic. So that's why I say, okay, I'll take up the challenge. So my first I revamped their undergraduate program related to U.S. foreign policy. So I imagine coming and teaching them about the founding fathers in Arabic, reading the U.S. Constitution in Arabic, what is it, the expansionism all the way to Alex de Tocqueville, creating and reading and text material for them. And it was very important because then I can see this is the impact that I brought into the region. Hence, that's where I started to see the formulation started to become, oh, there's Georgetown. The Safwan happened. So they were bringing back to the topic that Maryam was saying, those little events might bring, because it was actually an incident by an event that I met Dean Safwan, because he was the newly appointed dean, I think 2 years ago in Qatar. And I was like, oh, I met with him and I was like, yeah, I'm this and I'm teaching this. And I was like, why not coming to us? So the rest is history. Now I'm teaching with you guys, and that's an opportunity. So that's where it becomes important. I always tell my students, those events are not only event to listen, but also to be visible, whether physically, mentally, you're participating, networking, you're seeing who's there. You're really seeing yourself. Is it something that you want? And it's something that's worthwhile investing your time in, because essentially you'll be offsetting. You're gonna study or do this event, or you want to do a fun event. But those events are opportunities to be seen, visible, and might be asked the right question, or try to listen to the right answer. So it's very strategic. And I remember you were there yesterday for the chat with the someone. You asked the right question, and it's very important.
You're referring to the Isabel
Hamad, yes.
So I think what's interesting is in the trajectory of events, like nothing, I mean, you just jump on opportunities one after the next. And I think that's beautiful.
Thinking about online presence, I was thinking about LinkedIn.
Oh.
So I wanted to say to, students who are listening, don't rely on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great, but it's not what it used to be / what it's meant to be. And networking, as in person-to-person human networking, is so much more valuable and important than online networking. Not that that's worthless. I think people, especially students, have an inflated image of how helpful LinkedIn is. And then they let go of, the personal, learning how to say hello and maintain eye contact and have an interesting conversation. These are important life skills that we all need. So kind of this reliance on an online presence diminishes that. And it's important to be careful.
I could see that a lot of people are getting more opportunities actually by connecting and going like physically to these places. You mentioned visibility. Both of you, I think when we think of visibility, we think of it more of an online term, more about visibility online. So publishing is a way for you to maybe make a name out of yourself, to make yourself visible in the field, in the research areas. Publication, it's the backbone of academia. Maybe you can elaborate more on that.
So my position is not a core faculty position. I'm an adjunct. Postdoc is also not a core faculty position. But then once you're a core faculty member, your publications are central to your promotions, essentially, within academia, from assistant professor to associate to full-time professor. Back in the day, this is like 60s. And once you've published a PhD, it would have been enough. And that PhD would have been considered a publication. I'm talking specifically about the humanities. With time, that has developed into you needing to go to a university press or any other press and publishing your dissertation. But now the expectation is that you completely revamp your dissertation into a book and then you publish that book. So it's changed, but publication is still essential to academia. I think that was a learning curve for me when I started teaching. I used to think of the core activity in my profession as teaching, which it still to a degree is true. I love teaching, but then your research and your publications and delivering research findings at conferences is actually what's central to your identity as an academic. I think, Khalid, you've published a book, so maybe you can talk about that as well.
So I think it's similar to echoing Maryam. So published now so far 2 books through the main one was through Hamad bin Khalifa University Press. So it's a university press, and then it's a peer-reviewed book. So essentially, publication, yes, is the backbone. So within the backbone, by that, it's not any type of publication. We're not talking about self-publishing. It has to be peer-reviewed. The manuscript has to go through a different stages of review, peer review, rigor, copyright editing, in order to have a book. That's one of them. So one aspect, depending on the institution, called books. Another aspect, different institution will say, no, we're not only thinking of books. Books are not really tied to a tenure track, but actually level 1, Q1 journals. So journals become important. Journals will have to have their own level of publications. By that, I mean by indexing, tiers, and levels. Different institutions I work with will say, no, we want more of the journals. The tracks are different, but all of them, they have something in common thread. You have to publish, you have to be cited as credible, because that's when you go anywhere, especially when you move to policy arena, not only academia. If you're going to go to think tanks, if you don't have anything, it's the end product. You can prove that you're able to deliver something. That's not going to work. So it has to, teaching in itself, it's good only if you apply to a home institution that will only focus on teaching.
Technically, visible presence when it comes to publication is the number of citations that you have as an academic. This is more a very old question, but did you get anything published during your undergraduate years, or did you pursue like an honors thesis, any projects like Europe or research opportunities that Georgetown had to offer at that time?
So I didn't publish anything. I'm not sure what the structure is now, but I was an IPOL student and I also wanted to do the certificate of American Studies. So I applied for special permission to do both because you had to do one or the other, the IPOL honors or the certificate. So I got that permission. I wrote my capstone essay.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken about this in 10 years.
So I was like, maybe it's an old question.
It's a very...
So I remember doing that project over the summer between my junior and senior year. And then for the entirety of my senior year, I worked on the IPOL honors certificate. And both of them helped me. Both of these experiences helped me with my master's and PhD, because obviously they strengthened my application, but also I learned the research tools that are necessary to have to conduct bigger research projects.
Yeah, I can only imagine like how useful it is.
Especially if you end up going to a British PhD program, because it's just the project. There aren't any classes that you take. So it's very different from US-based PhDs where students walk in and take classes and have more intimate relationship with their supervisors. So in the British experience, the students are very independent. So you need to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that Georgetown was able to prepare you for that. I can only imagine like how many students are benefiting from the research opportunities here.
In my years, I don't remember there was any. I think the honor thesis was not introduced. The only thing that was introduced that was a certificate.
Yeah.
I remember the certificate. There was the American Studies certificate back in the days. Professor Amir AlSada was something with the Arab Regional Studies. But even with that, it was certificate. When it was at least 20 years ago, it was introduced if you take a number of series of courses. Similarly, I got during my undergrad an honor in economics. So I'm part of the Economic Society. And it's only because I worked with my professor, Adib Chaudhry, on an independent study. So that was my first exposure to actually harness the techniques of research. So it's most of the classes, even now, you see most of the students are writing essays, but not research, because writing essays is another way of saying it's like some sort of the body of knowledge, the literature review. So you're trying to synthesize information, put it together, create the tensions between the arguments or the assertions. But research will require methodology. It's only through that class I started the first exposure was actually quantitative research. By that, looking at the data and asking the data the question that we need to ask. So proper questions using line of regression or statistical tools to try to prove from the data something. Within that, it was, I remember it was 2007, and I took after that an internship with the Central Bank of Qatar. So it was tied to it, but it was nothing in itself was telling me, there was a product that was existing. Like now I feel a lot of products, like you have a research grant office, you can do a lot. So of course, as an institution, it's evolved from 20 years. So, but from that moment, it was that thing, and we applied to a research grant with him. So that's my little exposure. But essentially, 10 years after, it's actually through my second master's and then my PhD started to be more exposed in research methodology, and we had to take different classes and research.
I think advice that I would give the students listening, take on the opportunities that Georgetown gives you for research. As Professor Khalid emphasized, it's evolved a lot. Just expose yourself as much as possible. Even if you don't become an academic or a scholar, it's still good experience. You've touched on this, which is the evolution of Georgetown. You have both experienced GUQ as students seeking knowledge and now as faculty sharing it. So what evolution have you both witnessed in how the university approaches education and regional understanding?
I think it's a completely different animal. So when we were students, we started off in the LAS building.
Correct.
The number of faculty members was very small. Professor Amira Sumbul was our Mideast professor.
Correct.
I can't remember if there was anyone else focused on Middle East at that time. And then ultimately, Allah yarhamha, and then I remember Professor Judith Tucker coming in from the main campus.
True.
First semester
Yes.
leaving. And then Professor Abdullah Al-Aryan, I met when he was her teacher's assistant because he was a PhD student.
Wow.
Yeah, so the school has roots.
It's true. That's amazing to know the backstory. Yeah.
So so this is not specifically about the region, but I think education in general. Khalid, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember Wikipedia being the big bad wolf when we were students.
True.
The professors telling us be careful of Wikipedia, kind of what's happening now with ChatGPT. That is be careful of Wikipedia, don't trust anything, people can edit it. And, I went to high school when actual encyclopedias existed and you need to go to the library and take the letter E and look up whatever you're looking up.
Oh my God.
So Wikipedia was a big deal. And of course, as students, we had our ways around this. We'd still read the Wikipedia page before writing our essay. We'd look at the sources at the bottom. We'd write something from Wikipedia, but let's cite the source at the bottom.
We always have a way around it.
There's a way around it. So when I started teaching and I taught like one course before ChatGPT became a thing, one or two. So I didn't deal with AI at the beginning. And then there was a semester when suddenly AI was everywhere and students had access to it. And it's really made me think about why I'm teaching and how I'm teaching and what lessons I want the students to take out of the classroom. So I also I recognize that AI is not going anywhere and that ChatGPT is a tool and I use this tool often in my life. But I do tell my students that writing is a thinking exercise. So when you take away writing as a practice, you're taking away an opportunity for you to think about things on a deeper level. And I'll often, my classroom is a no technology classroom, so no laptops, no phones. And I'll often ask students to write a response in the class rather than write it and post it on Canvas. And a lot of them will comment we haven't written in a long time, just with a paper and a pen, which I feel it's such a lost art. And it's important for you to see your handwriting and have that connection with your own writing. So I think that's a big difference in terms of the students' educational experience. We didn't really, as students then, we didn't have to deal with technology to this extent. There's so many distractions now, and I think it's kind of our responsibility as professors to teach students how to deal with those distractions, because I think as a life skill, that's a lot more important than memorizing definitions of different words, which obviously you can look up in 3 seconds,
The comparison between Wikipedia and AI was just really funny.
Yeah.
As values, I think the institution still retain its value of teaching. The philosophy is still there. But where I was 20 years ago, smartphone didn't exist. We're still in the 2G edge. So it's still cellular. So accessing information was still limited to a device that's called a laptop, and there's a portal called the internet. It was not tools and applications, system talking to other system like today when we talk about AI and large processing language. Those are the things that dealing today, it makes it more challenging, especially in the class. How can we engage the students? I totally understand. The students here are different, but even I've seen it's not by here, I mean Qatar specific, but even in different part of the world, it's a generational thing. When we see the attention span to reading, is there an issue with reading? Now, you don't know what they read. The thing is, they will upload it to either one of the platforms. I won't say ChatGPT because there's so many platforms out there. Humanization, Notebook LM by the new, just launched by Google, or Gemini 2.5 or cloud system. So they can upload, prompt engineer the question, and then they'll give you a report. But that does not mean they read it. They did not internalize what they understand the theoretical frameworks. It just tells you something. It's a mini chatbot, you're dealing with it. That's I think the entire thing that academia and other institutions are facing. I won't say the AI because AI is a very small thing. This technological breakthrough. By that, I mean optimizing solutions and offering it, or going through a route that is more traditional, the art of expressing. So trying to internalize information is totally different. So I'm not saying, because the context that we live in is different.
I mean, yeah, I don't know I think you were there when I was part of the panel about AI. It was hosted by the Office of Academic Services.
Yes.
Between GEQ and NEQ.
Correct. Yes, you were there.
Basically, a panel of students who were giving their input when it comes to AI and technology in general. And I think one of the things that I emphasized is that students are becoming smarter. Even professors are becoming more aware of how students are using AI. Dr. AlSada, you focus on Gulf women's histories and cultural practices. You tailor these subjects specifically for students in the region. And honestly, how different would it be if you were teaching the same courses on Georgetown's main campus in DC?
All right. When I first started teaching courses specifically about Gulf women, well, this seems obvious, but then I was shocked at the time. But I attracted a lot of Qadri female students to the point where the first rendition of my class documenting Gulf women was just Qadri female students. And I don't know if that has happened ever at Georgetown. And that created a very special environment where students were able to discuss cultural they're able to theorize their culture in a way that was extremely nuanced, because they were all aware of what their culture was. So conversations happened on a deeper level, and students were comfortable bringing in real life examples. Now my class is still just women, which one day I hope to get a male student, but it is a mix. So I have international students as well as Qatari female students. And the difference is that there are a lot of ideas or concepts, especially things that are very specific to Arab culture, that as a class we will need to stop, take a step back and explain or theorize together, knowing that the international students are relying on that definition. Because unlike the history of the United States or the histories of different European countries, you won't have a textbook with a little box on the side that says what the definition of aib is or what the definition of jalabiya is. We're creating the content as a class. I consider my students to be my partners in knowledge creation. So we're creating the content together, exploring it on a deeper level, teaching it to the international students, and then hearing their reflections on this class. So we're not just learning about what Gulf women's lives were like, we're learning also about how to write about them, how to read them, how to critically analyze what has been written about those women. So it is a very unique class to teach in a very unique setting. One of the books I use is Gulf Women, edited by Amira Sumbul, just because it is the book about Gulf women. And what's interesting about this book is when the students read it, they will recognize not just the authors, but the names of people referenced in the book, and then the people referenced in the citations. And I don't think that happens in any other classroom where people are like, oh, this is my cousin, or this is my aunt, or these are my neighbors. Yeah. So that's a very unique experience. And then I also try to build bridges with different institutions across Education City to really kind of lean into the multiversity. So we visit QNL, we visit Methaf, and we went to Methaf over the summer, and one of the students recognized the paintings as being on loan from her grandmother's house, which is so typical of the Qatari educational experience, but also so unique to this setting. You don't really get it anywhere else. So, and I think that also allows for a deeper understanding of women's experiences, because then you have people talk, everyone in the class is a primary source, right? It makes it fun, it makes it dynamic, and it also gives the students agency in their learning experience.
That's so fascinating. And Dr. Khalid mentioned this briefly about the differences between students across campuses around the globe.
Yeah.
How do you tailor your classes for people at Georgetown? And what would be the difference if you were teaching at Georgetown campus at DC?
It's a valid question, because as an institution, as Georgetown institution, the program or the classes has to operate with the same either in this campus or main campus with the same academic rigor and approach. So essentially, it has to have the same standards, similar academic benchmarking by assessment, rubrics, language. By that language, when you look at the syllabus, it has the same look and feel, and you're not an alien to it. But what's the most important is echoing Maryam's is like the discussion, what happens in the classroom. It's not necessarily the material. The accessing the material is the same. You have the same access to resources, the same access to platforms, books. Now it comes the discussion. Now it comes to the classroom. In my case, because I'm giving a class in something called political resilience and social identities, the classroom discussion would be totally imagined from if it would be happening in the main campus in the U.S. context, given the heightened political polarization that's happening in the U.S. now. The same thing I'm teaching in France. France is going through a different phase of also political polarization between extreme right, extreme left, and the center of Macron's government. Also, so communities are really internalizing their own lived experiences to engage with the material. In this context here is very enriching because the professor who's teaching them is Qatari, but he's not talking about Qatar in the book. He's talking about a case study of Serbia and Vietnam, among other countries. So there's no affinity to one region. So I'm not Vietnamese. I'm not Serbian. I'm Qatari, but I'm looking at it objectively. So they're imparting knowledge that how can you be an someone from an ethnic background, a different, not Western, looking at things objectively. And that's important. The second, the class dynamic. By deconstructing views that the Western knowledge is more superior knowledge, by that their own claim understanding knowledge, I think the dynamic is more enriching because you are in a different and interesting zone. By that, you're very much, I won't say the globalized, but it's like the images that you think of the world. The professor is a scholar, can talk in any regions, a peer-reviewed regions, so could be this region or any other part of the world.
People come from all over the world. I can only imagine what lived experiences they're seeing the classes from. I wanted to wrap up with this question. If you could sit down with your younger self, what would you tell them about the journey ahead?
Don't be anxious. It's easier said than done. Back in my years, 16 years ago or 17 years ago, the state of the economy of the world was different. So I was not anxious in that much of landing a job. I was anxious, am I in the right field? The dynamic was more of the field. Am I doing the right thing by that in this field as opposed to other? And which one will lead me to where? And with the company, and with life, company, and then you name it, with my career, my academic career, lived different places. I think this now for the young generation, I would say, and there's always comes of what's the unknown in terms of very much the career path. It's challenging. I'm not saying it's not challenging. We're facing global economic recession. People don't talk about it, but it's still, there's a slower economic growth. The job market is shifting because of technological breakthroughs. I'm not saying it's bad, but because technological breakthrough, which means new skill sets has to be there. So what I would say to my older self, maybe if I were to be in this age, young generation, maybe upskilling and new skills. So yes, the skills that's there, it's good. I mean, there are other skills that need to be harnessed, whether it's, then the topic that Maryam touched upon, maybe networking, stakeholder engagement, that becomes important, especially if you want to work in it's not only about working in corporate or academia. Think tanks, opening your own business, being an entrepreneur. I would consider myself as a political entrepreneur because we have our own agency to publish, to teach, to move. And I see it with this generation. They long for this agency, and it could be being a digital nomad, working anywhere because of access to resources. Technology is evolving, so you never know. Is it a chip inside your brain and you will hear it? Is it through a podcast?
The don't be anxious is really relevant, I think, and it's a really good advice for people navigating uncertainties. As we wrap up today's conversation, I'm struck by something beautiful. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys are circular ones. Dr. Al-Jufairi and Dr. AlSada both traveled the world and made their marks on global stages. Yet here they are, back where it all began, now shaping the next generation of students. Special thanks to Dr. Al-Jufairi and Dr. AlSada for sharing their stories with us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for another episode of GQ Speaks, where the Hoya spirit knows no boundaries. Until next time, keep speaking, keep listening, and keep discovering.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of GQ Speaks. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspirations from our conversation today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow us on our Instagram page at GQ_speaks, and be sure to leave a review on Spotify to show your support.